Talk to you.
Let me talk to you.
I'm gonna do that.
Do it.
I'm gonna try to be more high energy today. Sean made a comment.
Did he?
Yeah. Not like negative, just like I'll say it later. Hello and welcome to the Tough Cover radio show, streaming live on Fox Sports Gambler, on YouTube, on Twitter, on iHeartRadio, on the website. I am your host, Mark Henry Jr. As always, you can go and follow me at Mark Henry Jr. _. Let me talk to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
We got Jeremy Horwath on the ones and twos, as always, over there. It's been a minute since I've been in the studio with Jeremy.
It has been. It's
been a minute.
It's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Good to be back. And also back in the studio, we got Sean.
Bernard. Just
Bernard, I already
There we go.
Here's what happens. It's like when I still don't know how to say Micah Parsons' name. I still say Mika sometimes, Micah.
Oh.
Once I've been like corrected on what's wrong, I then like can't remember which was the right one, which was the wrong. It's bad.
Sean Barnyard.
Dyslexic brain. It's been months that we've had you on, and I'm still messing it up. That's
All right.
great radio hosting by me. But Sean, we're talking all things Phillies today, all things NFC, all things AFC, all things college football. We will sneak in a little. You were in the mud this week on Twitter.
A little bit.
We need to come up with like an in the mud Twitter segment. So we'll figure that out in honor of Paul Reed.
Who's out of the mud.
Yeah, we're the opposite, the anti-Paul Reed segment maybe. But let's start it off. There's only one place to start it off, and it's obviously the Philadelphia Phillies. What's that? 3 in a row now? Is that
Talking about the fightins, Mark.
talking about the fightins? And it's my number one takeaway right now is that it's really a true shame that when the Phillies lost those 4 games in a row, that actually ended their season last week. It's really just I really wish I could get excited about them taking 2 of 3 from the best team in the AL. I really wish I could get excited about them winning 3 in a row. I really wish I could get excited about Zach Wheeler looking like an ace again. I really wish I could get excited about Bryce Harper being an MVP again. But the Negadelphians, they ended the season last week when it was on a little bit of a losing streak. So, I have to adhere to the Negadelphians and agree and understand that the season's over, unfortunately. I would like to say that it's not. I'm joking. Obviously, I'm joking. The Phillies are right on track. They're right where they need to be. They're right where I've said they'd be for weeks and months now. I feel incredibly positive about the Phillies and their direction, and I have some stats. I got a little Phillies file here to talk about some of the numbers. For all the negativity, all the complaints from Phillies Twitter, they are a half of a game back from having the 3rd best record in the NL and 2.5 back from having the 2nd best record in the NL. The Phillies are 16-10 in their last 26. They are 23-13 in their last 36. That is by the way, 16-10 in the last 26. That's a 100 win pace. 23-13 in their last 36, a 104 win pace. 31-15 in their last 46, a 109 win pace. And in their last 90 games, they are 14 games over 500. They are 52-38. That is a 94 win pace. According to Baseball Reference, they have a 77.4% chance to make the playoffs. That has been improved by 54% over the last month, which is the most in the majors by over 20% in terms of a 30-day improvement of your playoff odds. Over the last week, this week that people have tried to tell me that the sky is falling, the sky is Chicken Little Nick Pacone, the sky is falling. They've improved their playoff chances by more than every team in baseball except the Cubs over the last week. And he tweeted, the reason I shouted at Nick Pacone is he tweeted, all right, let's get to the Eagles already, because he doesn't want to hear positive positivity about his Phillies. His Phillies. He gets Nick Picone. He drives me nuts. He gets in these Twitter arguments defending the Phillies.
He's good.
And then he
knows what he's doing.
He is so much better at Twitter than I am in every possible facet and every possible form that I should be taking notes from him. And by the way, it's funny. I tweeted about it earlier in the week. When I go to the game, I turn into Nick Picone. When I'm at the game, the negativity is seeping through my skin. It's like injecting into my veins. Like I just feel it's like the Space Jam, like the I don't even know how you describe it. When they're the little things that they go in the fake suit to the game, and they go to the ball and they get in the ball and then they get inside Charles Barkley. Like that's what happens when I start to eat like food from the ballpark. It's like all this.
Some crab fries,
hot dog at a time.
Yeah, the Bulls barbecue sandwich at a time. It just seeps into the Negadelphianism seeps into my veins. But yeah, 77.4% chance to make the playoffs on Baseball Reference, 71% chance to make the playoffs on Fangraphs. Number 1 in F-WAR among starters in baseball. Number 1 in F-WAR among bullpen in baseball.
I think there's so many reasons to be optimistic. There's so many reasons to point to say, this is the exact type of team that can make a run when you go 4 deep in rotation the way you do, and when you have Wheeler looking like Wheeler. It's funny. So obviously, I'm very positive. I'm sky high on the Phillies. I continue to believe that they're a top 5 team in baseball and the 3rd best team in the NL. I truly do believe that. And I think that they're a team that started 4-9 and have been on a 94-win pace since. I think they've went through the normal ups and downs of what a calendar season looks like when you're a 94-win team. It's not just a 10-game win streak after 7-game win streak. You go through little patches. That's how a 162 baseball game season works. We cannot treat an 82-game basketball season or a 162-game baseball season, even more so, like a 17-game football season.
Yes.
And that's what we do in the city. And we can't
100%.
react like this to every game, to every
result,
to every little at bat. How long did we talk about Bryce Harper having a bad at bat, having a weird at bat where he was not swinging? That was a conversation for like 5 days. The guy couldn't see the ball. It's the lefty from a weird angle. Like I don't know how we have to make such huge controversies about everything. I think it just fills the air, and I understand it. But having said all that, and I'm going to open it up to you guys, but I have reason for optimism, and then to fuel the Negadelphianism, I do have reasons for concern.
Okay.
So the reason for optimism, this is pretty shocking stuff. And some of these stats are before last night, where Zach Wheeler was masterful, one of the best stats we've seen from a Phillies pitcher all year.
Disappointing with the rain delay too.
Yeah,
it killed the buzz of how good he was, but that's the Wheeler that we want to see.
There's a chance he could have went 9.
Yeah,
he could have at least went 8, and then maybe another batter in the 9. Get 89 pitches. He probably would have got him with the next one and got him
cruising through with 89.
Oh, cruising, absolutely cruising. He looked amazing, and it's exactly what you need. Before that game, I haven't even adjusted the numbers. I did this research before that game. Before that game, he led the MLB in F-WAR among starting pitchers. It's just because of the innings he's eaten all year, and he hasn't taken any time off. He leads the NL in FIP. He leads the NL in Ks versus walk ratio. That's before last night,
where he had a 7-inning, whatever you want to say,
shutout. Or one run, I guess. It was 1 run, not shutout. I think he looks like every bit the ace that we won't need him to be. It looks like the guy that carried us to the playoffs last year as our ace, and I expect him to continue to do so. And his baseball slot page for the nerds out there looks better than it's ever looked. Like he is looking like if he just went off that, he's better than he was last year. He's better than he was in 2021, and that's shocking stuff. So, but reason for optimism. Now we go to the lineup. Reason for concern. Obviously, everyone's going to be hyper-focused on Trey Turner. And I understand why. He hasn't been good. In the second half, Trey Turner's hitting 204 with a 573 OPS. Since July 4th, he's hitting 224 with a 644 OPS. That's bad. That's not good. And I'm not defending Trey Turner. I haven't, even in my non-stop kind of Twitter arguments that I've been getting in about the Phillies, you won't see me going in there and defending Trey Turner or telling people not to Trey Turner or telling people not to be upset with Trey Turner. Nobody was higher on the idea of signing Trey than I was. it's hard to even rectify right now how wrong I feel. Because this guy just doesn't look the same movie. And it's scary for the life of this contract. Ultimately, I think he'll get back to being maybe not Trey Turner, but maybe like 750, 800 OPS guy for the rest of the way. I'm hopeful of that, since even though he's been terrible, it's still 644 OPS since July 4th. The guy who I don't know if we'll see the positive version of for the rest of the season is Nick Castellanos.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to be concerned about Trey. Everyone wants to move Trey out of the two hole. And I've even heard some people be like, oh, you got to throw Nick in that two hole. Nick Castellanos in the second half is 6 for 50 with 1 walk and 8 strikeouts, hitting 120 with a 170 OBP and a 350 OPS. Dating back to July 4th, he's 10 for 80 with 2 walks and 33 strikeouts, hitting 125 with a 167 OPS and a 367 OPS. Yet Trey Turner's the one leading every complaint. Everyone wants to start the complaint with Trey Turner. Castellanos has been double as bad as Trey Turner has been. So I'm concerned about Nick. I'm concerned about Trey, but I think Trey will be passable at least. But I think outweighing those concerns is all the positives. I think Bryce is back on track. Schwarber, what a night last night from Kyle Schwarber with a double, a homer, and 3 walks. I think JT, even though the numbers haven't been there yet, I think he looks better at the plate than he looked when it was at his peak of being terrible. He had a nice hit yesterday. I think that Marsh obviously looks great. Stott obviously looks great. Like, I think there's a lot more reasons to be optimistic, but I will just say, if the Negadelphians are looking for something to complain about, it's not Kyle Schwarber's average. It's not Aaron Nola. It's not the bullpen. It's not Rob Thompson. It's Nick Castellanos.
Yeah, and to dive into the Castellanos and Trey Turner conversation. So one of the things that has made me optimistic about Trey Turner through the length of the season is he didn't look like the Nick Castellanos of last year, where the plate approach was just wrong. He was not seeing what he was swinging at. He couldn't find the zone, all that. Now I'm starting to see that from Trey Turner, is that he looks way more lost at the plate, that it's not the same guy that looks like the polished just baseball player that we've come to find. And that's my concern. And I see Castellanos slipping into these same habits. I'm kind of giving up on the idea of Trey Turner being this MVP caliber player or elite talent for this season specifically. I'm thinking that I still believe in him in the long term. I think he's too good of a player for them not to figure himself out over the length of this contract. But for this year specifically, it feels like he's digging deeper in his head. And Castellanos, I was very optimistic of at the beginning of this year, that he looked like that guy again. He was the best player on the Phillies for a good portion of the start of this season. But he's kind of slipping. Mm-hmm.
And that's why people are going to be negative about Trey and give Castellanos a pass. But the thing I struggle with, he's been here for 240 games now. It's been pretty terrible for like 160 of them.
Yeah.
He had a good 40 to 60 game stretch for sure. There's more negative sample size at this point with him as a Philly than positive.
For sure. And really, the guys that have been the driving force of this team has been those young guys. It's been the Bryson Stott. It's been the Brandon Marsh, been the Alec Boehm that have stepped up on many occasions. Bryson Stott specifically, I want to shout out as just like, he's become my favorite player on this team.
Me too.
He is just a winner.
Well, besides Ranger. Everyone knows my affinity for Mr. Suarez, but
very fair.
Position player, he's become my favorite. Him and Schwarber are my 2 favorite hitters on the team.
Yeah, and are you still a team Schwarber guy as far
Absolutely.
as do you still want him batting leadoff?
Yeah, yeah. You look at their rerecord when he's batting leadoff, and it's just so much better than when he's not. And I think that the thing that people don't realize is they're 13-0 in the last 13 games that Schwarber's homered. His power is so immensely valuable to this team. And it seems like his power goes up when he's in the leadoff spot. Whatever the reason for that being, it's over a pretty long sample size of a few years now. So at this point, I'm fine leading him there. I would say I would start to think, because I think at some point the lineup is so lefty heavy that at a certain point of the lineup, they're going to have to go lefty somewhere, like back to back. I think I'd think about moving Stoddard Harper to second and saying we're going lefty at the top of the lineup, deal with it. Like, we'll put a righty third and we'll put Schwarber fourth, or we'll put Bryce fourth, or we'll put Stott fourth. Like, I think that those 3 have to be in the top 4 of the lineup, and Boehm probably has to be as well, just because he's been such a rock solid guy. They have to move Castellanos down. It's tough to have Trey up there. I'm more willing to leave Trey up there because theoretically he is so prototypically a fit there.
Right.
But it's hard for me to just keep staring at Castellanos in the top 4 of this lineup.
And do you think Rob Thompson is actually going to change it? Because I think Topper is more of a creature of habit and a guy that is pretty locked in on this. And I do think it's a good quality in a manager to let guys play through things and that you should allow them to figure out their things. But there also has to be a line in a certain extent where you got to figure out what's best for the Philadelphia Phillies as a whole. For me right now, I do think that is dropping Trey Turner down in this lineup. I think that has to be done. Like last night specifically, after Schwarber, next 3 batters, 0 for 13 combined. You just can't have that for your 2, 3, 4 in a lineup. And that is tough to swallow. Bryce Harper also is getting back to the Bryce Harper that we've come to know.
And Bryce had a few walks.
Yeah. And we are seeing some of the power. It feels so much better when Bryce Harper's hitting home runs, man. Like I still respect that he's got up there, still a elite hitter, high level hitter, regardless of the power numbers. He's hitting them into the gaps, all that. But it's we need the power from Bryce Harper. That's who he is as a player, and I think that's going to be a huge X factor for how the rest of this season goes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like one X factor you could just say is just like hot streaks.
Yeah,
like you're obviously, it's so funny. Nobody misses Rhys Hoskins besides me. I feel like I think this team would be really, really scary with Rhys Hoskins' power in the lineup. If you had one more guy supplying some power, it would be a really, really scary thought. But
except where's he playing?
Well, I think the first base thing probably wouldn't have happened for Bryce. We probably would have been training him to go back to right field, and we probably would have left him at DH.
Do you think Rhys Hoskins ever gets his job back?
Probably not. I think Bryce is probably a career first baseman.
I agree. I right now, straight up, Bryce Harper has been significantly better as a defensive first baseman than Rhys Hoskins has ever been.
Absolutely. Rhys's values as a hitter,
for sure.
So I would love for them to bring him back as a DH option, but it doesn't seem like that'll happen since you have such a glut of DH options with Bryce, with Castellanos, with Schwarber. I don't think Rhys will be back, but he could come back and help the team this year potentially. But what I will say is that this team without Rhys was one of those players that could go on a tear for 2 to 3 weeks. And how many times did we try to tell that last year to the people complaining about him?
He's a very inconsistent player.
Yeah, but
he was consistently inconsistent though.
But I think that's valuable.
It is. And that's my point. When I say inconsistent, I don't mean it's always a bad thing, because his hot streaks are among some of the best hot streaks in baseball, but his cold streaks are also among some of the worst.
And, and you could say Schwarber's the same way. You could say Bryce is the same way. We've seen when these guys go on their runs, it lifts all tides. Like it kind of lifts everyone else up because it forces them to be thrown to. Like you can't throw around certain guys. So yeah, that's the X factor. I'd say the other X factor, just because also I believe in the pitching to keep up what they're doing pretty much. Like I don't see any regression coming. If anything, I see Nola getting back to what he does. If anything, I see Wheeler continuing to do what he does. If anything, I see Ranger looked good the other night. He battled. He had a tough second or third inning, battled and had a nice 3rd through 6th. So it's just those guys I think will continue to be able to fill that spot for us. The true X factor is JT. I think, like, what are we going to get from JT? It's been 2 straight years that the second half has been way better for him. So, you just got to hope that he's a second half creature. Like I said, I do think he's looked better at the plate in terms of his approach. So it's just a matter of putting that to execution and kind of being the guy that we need him to be. We don't need him to be the best catcher in baseball, but we need him to be like a 780 to 800 OPS guy, and a guy that has 20 homer pop, and a guy that, maintains his elite status as a defensive catcher, which he's done. He's absolutely done that. So even though we want to complain about JT, and I'm the leader of the complain about JT brigade kind of, but I would say that he's still extremely valuable as a defensive catcher. And I'm still hopeful that we're going to get hot streak JT Realmuto again. So I feel good about the Phillies. 77%, is that high or low for where you feel in terms of how likely it is the Phillies make the playoffs?
I think that's about right. I think that's good. And just a look across the wild card race, the Phillies are now slotted for that first wild card spot. It's obviously very close that they're only a half game above that. The Marlins are 3-9 in their last 12, so they're falling down a little bit.
I think it's like 5-15 in their last 22.
Yeah.
They've always been frauds.
Always fishy. Yeah, they didn't quite have
fishy.
it.
I like that. That's
I
good.
see what you did there.
That's good.
Cubs are sneakily finding themselves in the mix. They've been playing some really good baseball.
Really
lately.
good.
Yeah. They're
7-game win streak.
Yeah, only 3.5 back of that final wild card spot, but it's still more or less a 4-team race. Not even really. I guess the Diamondbacks and Cubs are both knocking at this point. So the race is heating up as the season progresses, but the Phillies have now kind of put themselves on an inside track, which is exactly where they want to be. They have the unfortunate disadvantage of being in the division with the Braves, who are the best team in all of baseball this year, but they are slated for that wild card slot. All they need is a ticket to the dance, and they can make it happen. We saw the same story last year. So I'm pretty optimistic. They've definitely put themselves in a significantly better spot than they were earlier on in the season. So overall, I'm very pretty positive about the outlook right now.
And people complain about the win last night. Like, I know Nick Picone, this is his second name drop for Nick Picone. He said like the Phillies lead the league in wins that are frustrating. And I understand being frustrated. Like, it was a boring game mostly.
There's kind of a charm to it, the way they go about it, how it's frustrating, whether it's, Castellanos and Bryson Stott running into each other to make the final out, or just making it a little more difficult than it needs to be. That's kind of become this Phillies team to me.
They're resilient. They've blown 7 saves this year. They're 7-0 in the games that they've blown those saves.
Wow.
It's one of the crazier stats I've ever seen. But they're just so resilient. And the thing I'd say about that, about complaining about a frustrating win against the Pirates, that's because they might not have the Phillies didn't capitalize on missed opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that they left all these runners on base. I understand that. You get away with that against the Pirates. And that's what I've been trying to tell people that have been complaining when they lose to good teams. They have an easy stretch coming. They have the easiest schedule in baseball over the next month. This is the time that you beef up that record. And even necessarily if you're not playing your best baseball, you're going to win some games. Last year, the Phillies went 16-3 against the Nationals. They went 71-73 against the rest of the MLB. Take care of business against the bad teams, and you're going to be in a good spot. It's what the Tampa Bay Rays have done a great job of for over a decade. They always beat the crap out of bad teams, and that's what the Phillies did last year. It's what they need to do this year. And you look at their upcoming schedule, they got a lot of them. They got a lot of bad teams that they can beat up on. 2 more against the Pirates. You have it's 4 against the Marlins. Obviously, the Marlins aren't a quote-unquote bad team. They're 5-15 in their last 20, I think. So it's the best time to play them right now. Then you got 3 against Kansas City at home, the second worst team in baseball, one of the worst teams in baseball history, the Kansas City Royals. Then you got the Nationals for 4 at home. You get the Twins for 3 at home. Twins are okay. They're about 500. They're 500, good pitching, terrible offense. And then you get 2 at Toronto. That's tough, but it's only 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
Then 3 at Washington. Again, more games at Washington. Then you get 3 at home against San Fran, which is tough, but you get it at home, and it's a team you might have to beat. Then you get 3 at home against the Cardinals, who are selling right now in a fire sale. Then you get 3 at home against the Angels. Obviously, not quite. That's where it kind of drops off in terms of getting easier, but that's a long stretch. That takes us from now, the end of July, even if we want to take out that Angels series, to August 27th.
Wow,
that's a full month.
And that Marlins series specifically is one that will basically count as double the value in the way that they are a half game behind the Phillies in a wild card race. That winning that series and winning those games, you are advancing yourself and pushing them down. So that is one that could be a key series when things are said and done in the wild card race. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. But that's a good Phil segment. We're going to talk a little bit more baseball at the end of the show. We'll give out our picks. I'm curious if Jeremy got that ready. You prepared over there?
I do have a couple picks.
It's been a couple weeks. I didn't know if you forgot how the show worked.
UFC picks.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. All right.
I like it.
I like that. Let's get weird.
Let's get weird.
I know there's a boxing fight tonight too. I don't know anything about it.
Spence and Crawford, Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford.
That's the guy over there. Out of
You're
us
a boxing guy?
I wouldn't say I'm a boxing guy. I know a little bit about this fight.
It's him. Yeah.
Okay. I saw there was like a backstage fight.
A little bit.
2 other boxers. Is that?
Yeah, they're blowing up the publicity on this one. There's some stunts going on, is what I would say.
It's smart.
Yeah,
that's what you got to do. It's combat sports for you.
This is the best boxing match in several years. At this
I feel like I heard that a couple months ago.
Yeah.
With who?
Tank and
Tank and Garcia.
I've heard that before.
I'll give you that.
I heard that earlier.
I'll give you that. I would say this is a more fair.
This is like heavy.
Garcia wasn't on his level, right?
Yeah.
That's what,
these are like 2 big dudes.
These are 2 of the top 10 pound for pound fighters.
Dudes.
They're all right. They're welterweight, but they're 2 of the top 10 pound for pound fighters in the world. So I don't think Ryan Garcia has that same. You know what I'm saying?
I got you. Yeah. So actually, on the other side, obviously this week, big week in Philadelphia, Eagles training camp started. So we're kicking off football preview month here on the Tough Cover Radio Show. We're doing it early. Most people would wait until the week before. We're giving out our NFC playoff predictions and our AFC playoff predictions. So on the other side, we're going to kick it off with the NFC. So keep it locked to the Gambler and keep listening to the Tough Cover Radio Show.
Get your tickets now
at AXS.com.
and it's time to kick this into high gear. I mean, this show, I obviously enjoy doing the summers. I enjoy doing, Phillies playoff streams. I enjoy talking about the Sixers playoffs when that's in the mix. March Madness, fantastic. But realistically, there's nothing like football.
I think that's sports talk as a whole too. That's everywhere. That's sports as a whole. It's just not the same until it's football season.
Yeah, football just hits different in this country, and I always knew that. And I used to always say basketball was my number one, but once I started getting into radio and obviously podcasting as well, it's just so set. Football is so set for sports talk. Yeah, like you react to the Sunday from Sunday to Tuesday, and then you start picking the next Sunday from Wednesday to Saturday, and you also have college football on that same cycle as well. It's incredible. It's like I have my own 6 to 8 football podcasts that I listen to that are on that exact schedule. And, it schedules my week out in terms of how I listen to that content. So I'm the same way. And I'm so excited that it's here. I don't ever remember being this pumped up for football season. Big part of that due to the expectations we have here in this city for the Philadelphia Eagles. And before we get to our picks in terms of the divisions, the wild cards, I don't ever remember. And I've said this to some friends and some family members, and they've thrown some years at me and some teams at me. I don't ever remember a preseason Philadelphia team being this championship or bust than the 2023 Eagles are. No matter what, if the Eagles don't win the Super Bowl this year, it will be a disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think everyone's mindset is pretty built for it, from Sirianni to Jalen Hurts to pretty much down the entire roster, that these guys are operating in the way that I want them to and seem to have the right mentality about it. But there's really no other way to cut it. That is the goal. We're about to do an NFC preview. Looking down at these teams, I can't think of a single one that should be beating the Eagles in terms of as on the season as a whole and going that deep in the playoffs. I don't expect the Eagles to go 17-0 in the regular season, cruise through. It's a very difficult schedule, all of that. But as far as the best team in the conference, it's absolutely the Philadelphia Eagles. And the more I dig into it, the more confident I feel about that. So that has to be the mindset, is you have to get there again and you have to find a way to win, because it was that close last year. It was a couple calls, a couple plays away, and there is a parade in Philadelphia. And that's frustrating to sit back here and realize, but it's also a huge sign of growth that I think they did that and got better this offseason. So I'm pretty excited about what I'm seeing. I love the mentality. I love the quotes from everything I'm hearing coming out of camp. And I really think that this team has a chance to deliver on that.
The other championship or bust teams that people have thrown at me are like the Dream Team Eagles.
Yeah.
They hadn't won anything before that. So it's hard to say like
Nnamdi Asomugha.
They didn't have the expectations this team has because they didn't come from the Super Bowl. Like the 2004 TO team, I get that they had lost a bunch of NFC championships, but they were labeled as losers kind of at that point, and like TO was trying to fix that. Like this, we don't think of this Eagles team as losers, even though they lost in the Super Bowl. It's like this is the start of something. And this is the start of an era where we win Super Bowls.
And it's also interesting to me that we're still very early in the Jalen Hurts career arc of seeing what this guy actually is as an NFL player. And there are no questions anymore. He's answered all expectations. Any questions about what he is as a football player? He's a franchise quarterback.
Absolutely.
He's the Eagles franchise quarterback. We're thrilled to have him. And I honestly think it goes under the radar just how much this guy checks every single box you look for as far as a person, a leader, of character in a locker room, and a player as a whole. So I'm completely thrilled with what I'm seeing about Jalen Hurts. And as much as it is an all-in Super Bowl or bust year, it still does give me optimism that the bottom line is that's our guy for the long term. And we have that as a building block, which I also think is a different picture than we've had in the past.
When Randy Moss was sitting in the chair that Sean Bernard is sitting in over there right now, I was leader of men. Yeah. Sean Brace asked him about Jalen, and I was sitting there watching, and I was just like, it was getting me ready to run through a wall.
Yeah.
Listening to Randy talk about Jalen Hurts. And by the way, just geeking out real quick, Randy Moss, the fact that he was in this studio, the fact that I met Randy Moss yesterday,
very cool.
I was on cloud nine. I don't geek out about meeting people very often, but I said it on my thing. One of the defining athletes in my childhood in terms of like you got Moss, in terms of what was the song Drop it like they did like a drop it like it's hot remix, but it was about when he pulled his pants down against Green Bay.
Oh, yeah,
When
dude.
the team gets behind, pull pull a Randy Moss. Pull a Randy Moss. Me and my friends used to quote that nonstop. When we were playing football on the side yard, we used to, play a ton of tackle football in my neighborhood. It was all everyone trying to be Randy Moss. Like when we were doing
Moss
that,
and people.
He was another level of athlete, and we were arguing about it with Sean Brace, and I'm sure we will more in the future. Randy Moss is the greatest receiver of all time. Jerry Rice was better after the age of 34, but you go look at that first 12 years of Randy's career, greatest receiver of all time. Anyway, back on track. Just wanted to throw that out there. I couldn't believe I drove in to meet Randy Moss. I was like, I'm supposed to be on Sean Brace's show. Why not come in and do it in person? So, that was a really, really cool thing we were able to do here at the Gambler. And I thought he was awesome. Really nice guy. So back on track. Let's start it with the NFC East. I think we're all going to have the same pick here. We're all picking the Eagles, right?
No. Of course. Of course we got to go with Philly.
And people are going to say that's some homer stuff right there.
I don't know if they will. I don't know if anyone will argue with that. The rest of this division is.
I guess I should be reading odds for this as well.
Yeah, and I have them in front of me. Eagles minus
Perfect.
135 to win the NFC East. Looking beyond that, we have the Cowboys at plus 190, Giants at plus 850, and Commanders all the way down at plus 1600. I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk through the division. I think that there will be somewhat of a race, but I'm very confident that the Eagles come out on top of the NFC East.
We're going to talk when we get to the wild cards. I want to have a New York Giants conversation.
Okay.
I saw a few tweets from you.
Yeah, it pains me to bring that up, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it when we get to the wild card. Those odds are messed up. That's what I'll say.
Okay.
And we'll talk about it later. But the Eagles should absolutely be even more favorite, to be quite honest.
I think they should too.
What do you say, minus 135?
Minus 135,
Yeah, I mean, you could still parlay with stuff. So
That's insane.
I'm probably going to end up taking that in some capacity in a couple leg parlay about futures. But let's get to the NFC North. I'd say the rest of the NFC are the three toughest divisions to pick in football. The AFC, I think everyone's going to roughly come out the same one. And then the Eagles, everyone's going to come out the same one. The rest of these divisions are tough. So let's start with the NFC North. Read off the odds for me.
Yeah, so Detroit Lions are the favorite at plus 140, but a lot of Lions hype. The Vikings right behind them at plus 275, the Bears at plus 400, and Packers at plus 400. So no real long shots in this division. This is a pretty one open for the taking.
I am not surprised Detroit's odds are that high.
Mm-hmm.
I am surprised Minnesota's are not more like 180, 160. Like I'm shocked they're almost double what Detroit's are. And then I'm kind of surprised Chicago and Green Bay are being looked at just like equally.
The same, yeah.
I would think Chicago should be better than Green Bay.
Yeah.
I guess that comes down to Jordan Love, and I was talking about it with my dad actually. Matt LaFleur, it's put up or shut up time for this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you a good coach or did you have Aaron Rodgers? That's what we're gonna find out. So if he can change his offense and gear it towards what Jordan Love does well, I mean, maybe Vegas is right to give him that respect. It would be really impressive.
Really impressive.
It'd be really impressive. That defense is still really good. Like the Packers still have a really, really good defensive roster. But if he's able to kind of craft a nice offense with Jordan Love there, that'd be really impressive. But my pick is Minnesota. I'm sticking with Minnesota. Everyone is gonna, hype up the Lions, and I understand why. I have them at 9-8, so I'm not like entirely out on them. But I have the Vikings winning 10 games. I know that they were lucky to win 12 games last year. They weren't a 12-win team. They went 10-1 in one-score games, and everyone's gonna point that out. The thing I'd say is that I think they'll probably be better than they were last year, but they won't be as lucky. So they'll win 10 games instead of 12 games, but maybe they are even better. If that makes sense. It'll just pan out where they won't be quite as lucky in one-score games. And the funny thing about that is the Giants were also very lucky in one-score games. And Brian Daboll gets all the credit in the world, and he deserves it. He's a great coach. He gets all the credit in the world for winning those close games and winning those one-score games. Yet we don't give the same credit to Kevin O'Connell, who was a first-year coach for Minnesota last year. I think he did a fantastic job. No one really cares. So it's like, the Vikings were lucky. They won't be this year. And it's not like, but O'Connell's a really good coach. I think he might be a really good coach. So I'm picking Minnesota. They're my team to win that division.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you here. I also have the Vikings. I kind of am of a similar mindset that I think plus 275 is just too different. If you'd asked me for those odds without looking, I would think would have been pretty even between the Lions and Vikings. So to me, I think that there's value there. Kirk Cousins has kind of won me over in a way that I still don't think he's some stud quarterback.
You watched the show, didn't you?
I did. But even last year, I thought he proved a lot to me that, like, again, I don't think he's this, you throw him on any franchise and he wins, but he can steer the ship in a way that is successful for your franchise. And Justin Jefferson truly is that guy as a wide receiver that's instant offense right there. I think their defense is good enough. I still think I'm still not out on the Lions either to tip a pick. I do have them getting in as a wild card selection. But I think the hype has gotten on a little strong for the Lions, so they haven't quite taken those steps yet. And to me, I got the Vikings winning the division here.
I'm all on the Lions.
Yeah.
I respect it.
Now, I am going to have it within about a game. I think Minnesota is right there.
And I have it within a game as well.
Yeah, I think it's right there. I think Detroit is just going to take another step. They have a lot of talent over there. Dan Campbell, which I know you've had a couple mixed opinions on Dan Campbell.
The true star there is Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
What he was able to do last year and the fact that he didn't get hired away. I was saying someone should go hire that guy. What he was able to scheme up there, all the play action with Goff, which is how you win with Goff.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see if people catch up to what they did last year or if they're just able to keep excelling because they were able to keep Goff in the same system and bring in even more talent around him. So
yeah, I just think that being in that division, I don't think it's a very good division. It's fine, but I just think that they have so much room to grow, and I think that over this whole 1 year span, they did fine last year. I think they're just going to continue to get better. Meanwhile, I think the other teams in the division are going down a little bit. So I'm going to go with Detroit and just a very close battle there.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, both defenses are bad. Detroit and Minnesota both have bad defenses. So it comes down to like offense and coaching staff. I'm not a Dan Campbell believer, as you know, but it weighs out because I think Ben Johnson's a great coach and Aaron Glenn's a really good DC as well. So they have a really good support staff. The Vikings, I'm buying in on their defense being better than it was last year, even though they lost talent from it because they brought in Brian Flores, who I think is a really good defensive coordinator. I think he'll be able to just scheme alone to bring them to average, whereas last year they were far below average. So I'm buying in on the defense being better in Minnesota than it is in Detroit. And I'm buying in on the fact that I think Justin Jefferson just gives you such a high floor.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. So,
Justin Jefferson is probably the best player on either one of these teams. And that
definitely
kind of wins me over. I get it's not as direct as that in football, that one player can't make that specific of a difference, especially at a wide receiver position. But I still think it is a huge swinging factor. And for a lot of last year, the stats were the Lions had the number 1 offense and the number 32 defense. That was it for a good portion of the season. I just looked it up. It ended. They were 5th on offense and 28th on defense. So I guess they closed the gap a little bit. But that is kind of what is my concern there. I don't think Jared Goff's a guy that you can win a shootout with in the same way that I think with Kirk Cousins you sometimes can. So that gives me optimism there. And I do give the Vikings a slight edge.
So let's get to the NFC South, this poop fest.
Oof.
I do have
a tough one.
I love my pick here. I will just say that. Let's go to Jeremy first. Let's shift it around.
I am a strong believer that whoever wins this division is going to be out within the first round, no matter who they face.
It's a safe take.
I'm not very confident in this pick. I'm going to go with Carolina.
Okay.
I like Bryce Young. I can't say I like too much about them. They got Miles Sanders, but I just think the rest of that division, Buccaneers now not going to be doing anything over there. I am not a believer in the Saints at all, and I'm just picking the best of the worst. I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers.
And that would leave some value there as the Panthers are plus 400, which is 3rd in this division. The favorites are the New Orleans Saints at plus 120, Falcons at plus 215, right behind them. The Panthers then at plus 400, and Buccaneers all the way down at plus 800. So Mark Henry Jr., you felt confident about your pick here. What are you rocking with?
I'm right there with Jeremy.
Wow.
I'm on Carolina.
Let's go.
Wow.
I love Carolina this year. I think the best defensive coordinator in football is Giro Evero, the Denver Broncos defensive coordinator from last season. He did such an incredible job that if the Broncos would have scored 17 points per game last year, they would have went 15-2. That's how good the Broncos defense was. And you go and look at that Broncos defense roster. Hasn't really changed from last year. Go look at it. You're not like walking away like, oh my God, this is so stacked and loaded. Like, I think a lot of it was scheme. Like, I think Evero did a lot of it, and he left Denver to go to Carolina with Frank Reich, who I think is such a massive improvement on what they had there with Matt Rule and then the interim coach, Steve Wilkes. Like, I think I'm not even a big Frank Reich guy, but I think he's like a guy that players like. And I think he's a nice he's like his smart offensive mind. He will be a good play caller. And I think he will ease Bryce Young in, but Bryce Young has the pocket awareness to be good right away. And I think he's going to be like a point guard at the quarterback position and the way he distributes the ball. I really like Bryce Young. I think Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard will be a nice kind of combo there in the backfield. They have a really good O-line, Carolina. They drafted a couple pieces over the last couple of years that should be, in good position to succeed this year.
Hayden Hurst.
Yeah.
Hayden Hurst, I like.
That's good. That's a nice pickup. Thielen was a nice pickup.
Yes.
DJ Chark. They don't have that number one receiver. They drafted Jonathan Mingo, who I'm not a huge fan of. But Thielen and Chark are nice guys to bring in to hope that they can step in. Terrace Marshall's a guy who they drafted a few years ago. They're hoping steps up. They have a lot of guys at wide receiver. We'll see if like one or two of them can step up and be true, guys for them. That's what they're going to need. But the reason I'm in on Carolina is the defense. Brian Burns, Derek Brown, that both of them just got paid recently. Jiro Evero, like I said, they have a really, really good defensive secondary led by J.C. Horn, who's one of the best corners in football. I love this, love this Carolina defense. I have them going 9-8 and running away with the division. I don't think there's another team winning 8 games in this division.
Yeah, I'll start off with my concerns with the Panthers. For starters, I'm happy with the Adam Thielen addition. That was a little bit of a late offseason addition. I was ready to be pretty fired up about the Panthers just not putting Bryce Young in a position to succeed because if DJ Chark and Terrence Marshall Jr. are your 1 and 2 wide receivers, no disrespect to those guys, but that's just not an infrastructure for winning for a young QB.
You better not be disrespecting my guy DJ Chark.
I mean, he's fine, but
I'm the biggest DJ Chark guy in the business today.
Right.
He had a really good 2019, and I've been living off it since. Like I've been saying, like that guy can be good. Like he had like 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns, and I've been holding on to it because I loved him that year in fantasy.
Fair enough. I'm gonna roll with the Saints as my pick here. Plus 120 on the odds. I mean, you look at this entire division, the quarterback straight up. Derek Carr will be under center for the Saints this year. He's the best quarterback in this division, and that's not a flex. That is, he's going against Desmond Ridder, who'll be suiting up for the Falcons. Bryce Young, who's the question mark with the Panthers. We don't truly know what he is yet. And it's looking like Baker Mayfield will be the starter for the Buccaneers. So for me, I just think Derek Carr, I can at least squint my eyes and think he's going to be an okay quarterback on a somewhat weekly basis. So I will take the Saints. I don't think anybody in this division is making any legitimate noise this year, but I think that's probably the safe bet there.
Yeah, my concerns with the Saints were like the QB play was pretty good last year. If you look at like statistically what Dalton did and when Jameis was in, they played pretty well. Like they were like the 17th or 18th best quarterback. Like is Derek Carr confirmed a top half of the league quarterback? I don't know.
No.
I don't know if he's going to be better than what they had at that position last year. And Kamara, who knows if he's getting suspended or not? That's kind of the big thing up in the air. They're the other team. In my opinion, it'll be the Panthers or the Saints. I lean with kind of the Panthers being a bit of the surprise this year and getting the new coach in there and the rookie quarterback. Like I could just see them being one of the stories of the season this year and kind of surprising people.
So you have no belief in the Falcons then?
No.
I think that's fair.
I'm not a Desmond Ridder guy.
Yeah, I'm not a Desmond Ridder guy either. I'm curious how much Bijan Robinson touches the ball this year. I think they're going to give it to him a ton.
Yeah.
I think that's going to essentially be their offense for the most part, whether it's him coming out with a screen, whether it's giving him the ball on a handoff, whatever it is. I think that's the guy that, as far as fantasy-wise, you should be jumping on. But as a team as a whole, I don't buy in on the Falcons either.
I like Arthur Smith a lot as a coach. I like Kyle Pitts. I like Drake London. I like Bijan. Arthur Smith's going to get fired after this year when they win 6 or 7 games, and the guy will have never had an NFL quarterback to work with. He had
Matt Ryan,
the corpse of Matt Ryan. He had obviously last year Mariota, and now Desmond Ridder. Like none of those guys are starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So I think that guy's
which did kind of well with Mariota.
He
like,
did
with what Marcus Mariota is. He did pretty well for them.
He went 7-10 2 years ago with Matt Ryan, who was a dead man walking on the Colts last year. Like that guy couldn't move 2 inches in the pocket.
Even the best version of Matt Ryan was barely moving in the pocket.
Yeah. This will be a fast one, I think. NFC West. Are you guys both on the Niners here?
I am.
Okay.
No.
You're on the Niners.
No.
Okay.
You know where I'm at.
Yeah, me and Jeremy are in the same place here.
So to start off with, Niners sitting at minus 160, the favorites. We've heard they've been in the news quite a bit this offseason with all the comments coming out of San Francisco. Yeah, the 40 whiners out there. Seattle Seahawks right behind them at plus 195. And then the Rams at plus 1,000 and Cardinals at plus 2,500 are the other two there. So it really is a race between the 49ers and Seahawks. You guys are sitting Seahawks.
The 2 worst teams in football are in this division, by the way. The Rams and the Cardinals are the two worst teams in football, definitively to me. Washington's the other one I would throw in the conversation. But the Rams and Cardinals are the two worst, so I think that props up both of these teams. San Fran and Seattle are going to get 4 free wins, in my opinion, and I'm going with the Seattle Seahawks. I know people don't believe in Geno, and they think he's just going to fall off the face of the earth. This is another year in the same system. They kept their offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron. They also kept DK Metcalf. They kept Tyler Lockett. They kept Kenneth Walker. And oh, yeah, they added Zach Charbonnet, probably the second or third best running back in this year's draft, to have a two-headed monster running back. And they added definitively the best wide receiver in the draft. And in my opinion, one of the top 5 receivers that's come out of the draft in the last 5 years in Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he's that special. He's that good. This is a guy who played the slot on a team with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, 2 guys who cemented themselves as top 15 guys last year. 2 guys who are being drafted in the top 15 in fantasy this year.
Mm-hmm.
He was far better than both of them when he was on the same field as both of them. I think that it cannot be stated how much of an impact I think JSN is going to make on Seattle's offense. I think Seattle's going to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. I think they're going to win 13 games, and I think they're going to edge out San Fran. I think San Fran's going to win 12 games and be a wild card. Like, that's how good I think these two teams are going to be. I think they're going to be the second and third best teams in the NFC, even though I do have Seattle having a better record than the Eagles.
Yeah, and I have both these teams making the playoffs as well. I do think the 49ers come out and win the division just because I do think the 49ers, as much as I want to complain about the talking, the conversations, the Deebo Samuel opening his mouth, all these things, I do think they're going to come in focus this year, that this is going to be a statement season for the 49ers, and it should be because they still have a lot to prove. I'm not a Brock Purdy guy either. I'm definitely not a Trey Lance guy. I think I've officially locked that in, that I think Trey Lance in no world will ever be an NFL quarterback. The guy just hasn't played football. He hasn't played a complete season of football since he was a senior in high school. And these are the prime developmental years of your entire career. Like, you need to be learning how to play, making mistakes. The guy's either been hurt. It was the COVID year at North Dakota State where he played 2 games. There's just not enough football. There's not enough of sample size. And I think that they have to either sell now and see what you can get for him, or at least just swallow that he's not going to be the guy and who Brock Purdy is.
Yeah, no, I didn't know you had such a hardcore Trey Lance take.
I'm coming out with some anti-QB takes.
He came this morning fired up about Trey Lance.
I don't know why.
I like that. I've been positive on Trey Lance, but it's hard to, at this point, the developmental process is just so messed up.
Right, and I feel like bad for him to an extent. Like, it's not his fault, but that is kind of how the situation is, and you got to call it how it is.
So real quick before break, let's do wild cards. We'll give our NFC Conference Championship when we do the end of our AFC in the next segment. But wild cards, my number 5, like my top wild card, San Fran. My number 6, my second wild card is the Dallas Cowboys, and my number 7, my third wild card is the New York Giants. I think the Cowboys and Giants are exactly even for me. I have them both finishing 10-7 and both getting in. Yet Dallas is plus 190 to win the division, and New York's plus 850. I'm sure Dallas is minus money to make the playoffs. I think I saw New York is like plus 270 to make the playoffs when they made it last season, and the NFC is brutal. I mean, think about this. Like, the Rams aren't making the playoffs. The Cardinals aren't making the playoffs. I don't think anyone that doesn't win the South is making the playoffs. None of those teams are getting a wild card. That's 5 off the bat. The Commanders aren't making the playoffs. I don't think the Packers are making the playoffs. So then it comes down to, we're saying that 7th spot is between the Giants, the Lions, or Vikings, depending on how you pick that, and the Bears. That's what it comes down to. They're the only team out of that group that made the playoffs last year. And I understand I would usually be looking for regression. Brian Daboll is too good of a coach to let that happen. And I think Daniel Jones, with his mobility, at least gives them, I think they added Tyrod or Teddy Bridgewater as the backup too. I don't know who it was, but they added a solid backup. I think the mobility that Jones has gives you a pretty high floor. Even though I'm an anti-Daniel Jones guy, I'm not a fan.
Okay. So first I'll list off my wild cards here, and then I'll hit you with a little take on the quarterback situation as well. I'm wrapping up with the Seahawks, Giants, and Lions is my 3 wild cards. So I have the Cowboys not making the playoffs with that.
The Lions are my first team out.
Yeah.
It's not crazy.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the toss up there. And I do have the Giants above the Cowboys. I think I would take Daniel Jones over Dak Prescott as a starting quarterback. Do you think that's crazy?
Yeah.
Dak Prescott led the NFL in interceptions last year while missing 5 games. Last year was the first time in his career that he was asked to be the engine of an offense, that it is your job to create, and he just straight up was not good enough. I don't expect that to change. I think he is who he is. He falls much closer to this Brock Purdy, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff type of conversation than he does with the top dogs.
I think that's disrespectful. And I can't believe I'm sitting here defending Dak Prescott. I will say he's lost a lot of his value since he stopped using his legs as much since the injury. That's definitely something to point out. But in 2021, this guy had 4,500 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, and 10 picks. Like that, we're 2 years removed from that. So it's hard for me to look past that. There was obviously some problems last year. I think the interceptions, not to be a Cowboys fan, there were some of them that were pretty unlucky in terms of some bounce passes.
But that happens to every quarterback.
For sure. I think it's something that regresses up and down in terms of that luck-based stuff, but I would much rather Dak than Jones. But Jones is definitely a guy that has cemented himself as a starting quarterback. He's a guy who I used to think, like, when are we going to take this seriously in New York? His mobility gives him
a real
floor.
Yeah,
absolutely. He's definitely a mobile guy who gives your offense a lot of options. But Dak, 2019, 4,900 yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 picks. Like, it's just hard for me to wipe those years from my brain.
But I think those best years were all set up when it was prime Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
And the offensive line has always been awesome in front of him. As that deteriorates, like, I just don't think Dak Prescott's a guy that is the engine of an offense that you're building around him. I think he's a guy who can run a successful offense with the right pieces around him. I don't really think they have those right pieces around him. And I think that we're going to see that he can't raise the guys around him in the way that he can kind of fill that if they're there.
I'm really high on Pollard. I think Pollard's really good. I'm really high on Lamb. I like what they did getting Brandon Cooks. I think Brandon Cooks is going to be a really good second receiver for them. But Mike McCarthy's calling plays, so that's concerning. We're going to take a break, and on the other side, we're going to wrap this segment up, and we're going to do our AFC picks. So keep it locked to the Tough Cover Radio Show right here on The Gambler.
Hi, it's Betty from Barbera, plus tax.
Tough Cover Radio Show. I was jamming out the Jimmy Eat World there. Couldn't come back in. I needed some jam time. But let's finish it out. We're getting to the AFC picks. We're going to do that in just a second, but we had to cut Jeremy off. Jeremy, wild cards, what do you got?
Wild card for the NFC. I do have the 49ers just because I think Seattle is going to win 12, 13 games. And I think San Fran will be right behind them. And then after that, I'm going to go with Dallas. I think it's so hard to pick in the NFC because I don't like any of these teams. But I'm going to go with Dallas as that 6th seed. And then in the 7th seed, I'm going to go with Minnesota. I just think that between them and the Lions, they're going to be within one game of each other. And I just think they're going to sneak into the playoffs.
So it's funny. So each of us had 6 similar. Like I had 6 similar to Jeremy. I had 6 similar to Sean. Sean had 6 similar to Jeremy. The one difference is I had actually, that's not even necessarily true because so me and Sean both had the Giants. You and Sean both had the Lions.
Do you have the Lions as your wild card?
I've Lions as wild card.
And
Yes,
me and you both had Dallas. So
right,
I guess
it's weird.
Each of us left out one team that the other two had. So I left out Detroit. You left out New York. Sean left out Dallas.
That's wild.
Yes.
Interesting. And then we had Carolina and he had New Orleans, but the South's like a whole other conversation.
Yeah, who cares? Yeah.
And we're going to give the NFC champ. Actually, let's just do that now. My NFC championship is my 1 seed versus my 2 seed. I have the Philadelphia Eagles going into Seattle and going to the Super Bowl once again. They have to do it on the road this time, though. They have to go into Seattle. I think it's Quest Field. They have to go into Seattle and take them down. So I have Philly taking down Seattle on the road.
I'm running it right back from last year. I think it is Eagles and 49ers in the NFC Championship. And I think we're going to see the exact same result of the Eagles putting a beating on them. That's my official prediction.
I'm also going to go with Philly and Seattle. I have to ride with Philly, and I have to ride with Seattle. They wrote me off, but I didn't write back, Mark.
Jeremy would have to be like Donna Kelsey with the split jersey with the Eagles Seahawks
just
jersey.
A huge Birds fan over there.
If Gino goes that far, I might root for Gino over the Eagles. Joking. Relax. We're in Philly. But no, in all seriousness, I do think that Seattle is the 2nd best team in the NFC, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I love the Seattle belief, and I'm here with you this year.
Yeah, you're here
with you this year.
We're in it together.
We're a Seattle radio show. And you had them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I have them as a wild card. I think Niners and Seahawks both make the playoffs, so that division's strong too. I mean, that and NFC East are probably the teams that come out of those divisions, or at least win that mix, is probably who I got winning the NFC. So we'll see.
I'd be interested what an Eagles, Seahawks, Niners to all make the playoffs parlay would pay out, because I think there's no chance all 3 of them, all 3 of them will be in it. Like I don't see any way the Eagles don't get in at least as a wild card. And with the 4 free wins that Arizona and LA give Seattle and San Fran, I think they're both going to get in because they need to go 5 and
that's a tough cover parlay
8.
right there.
We'll look into that. Yeah, honestly, even if it's just Seattle and San Fran, like both of those teams are going to get
probably
in.
plus money.
Yeah, I think it probably is. So. It's interesting. So let's do AFC. We're going over to the AFC East. I'm curious to see how chalk we go, because I'm pretty chalk throughout the AFC. But AFC East, I have Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
We all have Buffalo.
As do I.
Yeah.
Okay.
Buffalo sitting at plus 120, the favorite in this one. The Jets right behind them at plus 270, who have quite a bit of buzz around them as
actually
well.
Higher than I would have guessed.
That is the other team that I like, but I don't think they're going to come anywhere close to Buffalo.
Mm-hmm. And Dolphins also not very far off at plus 300. Patriots all the way down at plus 800. So it's going to be a competitive division. I also think Buffalo wins it. I think the Bills are just too polished and have too much experience for them not to find a way. I have more questions about both the other teams, mainly Tua's health with the Dolphins is the biggest X factor there. And I just need to see the Jets. I get it all works in theory, but these big splash moves, they just don't always work in actuality as they do on paper. So I need to see it for a little bit, but I'm locking in the Bills to win this.
So I'm going to skip one division. I'm going to skip it and leave it for the last one because I think it's interesting. But let's go to the AFC South.
Okay. And the favorite to win the division is the Jacksonville Jaguars at minus 155. Right behind them at the Tennessee Titans at plus 350. So a pretty big drop off there.
Yeah.
Indianapolis Colts at plus 600 and Houston Texans at plus 800 to round it out.
I love the Jags plus 155.
Oh,
there.
yeah.
No way
Minus
anyone else.
155.
Oh, it's
dude.
minus.
Minus 155.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That does make sense.
That makes sense. That's the correct line, honestly.
Yes.
There's no way that they miss the playoffs there.
There's no way they don't win the division.
Who are we all have Jacksonville?
I have the Tennessee Titans. here.
Wow, Sean Bernard.
I am. I think the Jaguars likely still sneak their way in the playoffs.
I
Although
forgot you're
flip-flopped.
anti-Trevor.
I'm not a Trevor Lawrence guy either.
Wow.
What? How are you an anti-Trevor Lawrence
Chanson's
guy?
turned him.
Yeah.
Chanson's turned him.
Well, so I said Justin Herbert is my main culprit for this fight, but I think Trevor Lawrence fits a little bit of the same build where they're just crowned a little before they show it. They haven't quite ascended.
Trevor
Showed
won
more
the playoff game. He came
over
back from,
over
back from down
Justin
28-0. And then also he had a really good game against Mahomes in Kansas City the next week. And they kept it close with the eventual Super Bowl champions. So I am all aboard the Trevor Lawrence fan club, and he's my MVP pick this year. The Jags are my number 2 seed in the AFC behind the Chiefs. I'm all in on Jacksonville. You're all in on Tennessee over there. You like the DeAndre Hopkins move.
I do.
Would you have had them as your division winner before that news?
Probably not.
Okay.
That definitely bumped it up in my mind. I mean, Derrick Henry, as much as there's all the talk about running backs and what they're paid, all those conversations, Derrick Henry is very much the number one exception to the rule. That guy is the hub, the engine of an offense, the guy that can just get the job done on an every down basis. I think that can carry a team, and he's kind of proven that to be the case. Ryan Tannehill, I don't think is awesome. They have a nice little mix of quarterbacks. I'm curious how it plays out. Right now, they have Tannehill listed as the number 1, but Will Levis and Malik Willis kind of peeking over the shoulder. Willis, I was not impressed with last year.
Get cut, apparently.
Willis?
Yeah.
Wow. I would be surprised if they cut him this early in it, but I don't think he's the answer at quarterback by any means. I'm curious to see if Will Levis gets any opportunity, but either way.
You know my take on Will Levis.
Yeah.
I remember. Not a fan of the banana eating mayo in the coffee man. Will
Pretty
Levis.
Gross.
Not a
That's
fan.
weird.
And I'm not a Ryan Tannehill guy. So that's really what it comes down to for me with Tennessee.
Yeah.
I actually think the team that scares me the most for Jacksonville, Houston.
Really?
I could see Houston being better than we think because I think their head coach the last 2 years has been such a moron. Like David Culley was just like an old nice man. It seems like he was just like a nice man trying to figure out like an awful situation with a terrible front office. And then Lovie Smith came in last year and seemed like he didn't care. Like that guy went 5-7 at Illinois in the Big Ten and failed upwards. He got fired into being the head coach of the Houston Texans. Like D'Amico Ryans, I don't know if he's going to be a great coach. I think he's going to be locked in, and he's like
awesome.
He seems like the right type of guy to lead your team. And all the stuff out of training camp is that he's been awesome. And I like CJ Stroud, and more so than me liking CJ Stroud, I think he's NFL ready. I think he's ready to step in and be a good quarterback. Not a lot around him. The defense has some pieces you can look at and convince yourself on. And D'Amico Ryans, I think, will make that defense average, like at least. So I think they win 7-8 games, Houston. I actually think they come in second in that division. But Jeremy, you're a Jacksonville guy with me, but out of Tennessee, Houston, and Indianapolis, who scares you the most of the three for Jacksonville?
I don't think it's very. I'm not going to say Houston at all. I can't say that yet. I do think that they have a future like close to them, but I can't do Houston yet.
Oh, and I didn't throw that in. Besides just adding CJ Stroud, they also traded up to add the best defensive player in the draft. So long term, maybe not a smart trade that they made to give up all that future first, but they have no reason to tank. Like they gave up their first next year. Like they're going all in on trying to win, and they're adding 2 super studs. So just another thing to throw out there. I forgot to mention that.
I did love that, by the way. But I guess I was going to say Tennessee just because they are the most like average team, I guess. Like I think they are such of just like an 8-9, like a 7-10 win team. I just feel like that is Tennessee. So I don't see the other 2 teams being better than that. But they have more potential too, I guess. I don't see Tennessee being much worse than 7-10, but I don't see them being any better than 8-9. So I'm going to say Tennessee out of those teams.
They're a team that you don't want to play either, Tennessee. Like
Vrabel's a great coach.
Yeah. Physical, beat you down. Vrabel's a good coach. He's not going to give away games. I like the Titans. I think there's more to them than they've been given credit this offseason.
AFC West. We all, I imagine none of us are going to talk about the Raiders.
Hope we're all going to say KC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are.
Okay,
We
all
are.
right.
We're
It
all
is-
going to say KC.
It is a pretty stacked division, but I
Yeah.
do think the Chiefs are the answer. Minus 165 favorites to win the AFC West. Chargers behind them plus 340. Broncos at plus 550 behind them,
Wow.
and Raiders all the way down at plus 1200. So a little bit of a fall from the graces. I remember this time last year I was speaking about could all four of these teams make the playoffs, and a little bit different outlook this year.
Yeah, Denver's interesting to me. If I was going to make a bet on Denver, it would be to make the playoffs and not the division, because then
Yeah.
you don't have to deal with Kansas City. And I'm sure they are plus money still to make the playoffs. So, yeah, we all have Kansas City there. Let's move to the wild cards. I'll start it off. My 3 wild cards I've talked ad nauseum on this show.
Skipping AFC North.
Oh, my
Yeah.
bad. I wanted to skip it to leave it to last because I think it's interesting. I think it's the most
This
interesting.
this is the only interesting one in the AFC in my mind.
Yeah, I think it's the most interesting. I still went chalk. I'm picking the Bengals with an asterisk saying if Burrow's playing week 1,
Right.
That's my seed.
but I'm still picking the Bengals. Are you?
So I'm not going chalk here, and I will say
Okay.
on the Joe Burrow thing that that looked way worse. I thought this was going to be a done for the season
too.
injury
So
when I
did
saw
I.
that video. I'm happy to see that it is a calf issue and that week 1 seems like a serious target date for him. As far as the odds sit, the Bengals remain the favorites at plus 150. Ravens behind them at plus 220. Browns at plus 380 and Steelers at plus 425. So nobody much of a long shot here. I'm going with the Ravens at plus 220 to win the division here. I'm a Lamar believer. I think the pendulum has swung too far on the negativity with Lamar that I think he's now better than he's been given credit. This
The pendulum's never swung. It's always been.
Yeah, it always has.
It's always
That is
been
true.
too negative. That no one's been more unfairly treated by the media than Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This is a guy who won MVP. He's literally been MVP of the NFL. He's shown he's had some winning seasons.
Won multiple playoff games now, so people can't even really use that at him anymore.
And they did pay up to put some receivers around him. Odell Beckham, Zay Flowers. I think the Ravens are a pretty complete team. They've got a good buzz about them, and I think that they're going to find a way to squeak out and win this division.
I have them in the playoffs, so it's not crazy. I do have them coming in 3rd in this division, though. So who do you have, Jeremy?
I do have Cincinnati, but I was very close choosing Baltimore actually. But that's because of Joe Burrow. I didn't know exactly how he was going to be.
Yeah.
I know they're aiming for week 1, but it's still something to worry about for the rest of the season as well, because how is he going to come back from it and everything like that. So I am still going to go with Cincinnati, but I'm very close with Baltimore, like really close.
If Burrow's not playing week 1, my pick is Pittsburgh to win the division.
That's what I was waiting to hear.
My pick would be Pittsburgh to win the division. I have Cincy at 12 wins, and I have Pittsburgh at 11 wins. If Burrow's hurt, that probably shifts.
Yeah.
To Pittsburgh at 12 and Cincy at 11. So my number 1 wild card, it leads nicely into that, is Pittsburgh. I don't understand the lack of buzz around Pittsburgh. Their over under it actually has went up a little bit, so maybe there is some buzz. It's 8.5, but now it's like minus 160. So there's the juice has kind of been taken out of it. But TJ Watt missed 7 games last year. Mitchell Trubisky started 7 games last year, and this was still a team that went 9-8 and would have made the playoffs if the Dolphins didn't make a field goal at the end of their Week 18 game. TJ Watt is the most valuable non-quarterback in the NFL, and the stats show it. When he played last year, the Steelers were 8-2. Without him, they were 1-6. They are 36-14-1 over the last 4 years when Watt plays. Unless you think Watt's going to get hurt, I don't think it makes sense to predict the Steelers to not win double-digit games. And you look at after their week 9 bye, Kenny Pickett, the numbers won't wow you, but he ranked 6th in EPA per play, and they won 7 of their final 9 with him under the helm. Those 2 losses came to the Bengals and the Ravens on the road by a combined 9 points. So they went 7-2 to close out the season. Both losses were road losses by an average of 4.5 points. Like, I don't see any way Pittsburgh's not better. So Pittsburgh's my 5 seed. They are slotting in there at 11-6. My 6 seed is Baltimore. So 3 teams from that division making the playoffs, which I have in the NFC as well, because I have the Eagles, Cowboys, and Giants. So in two conferences, I have 3 teams making the playoffs. And then my 7 seed, this is the tough one. This is the one that I'm wrestling with like 4 teams on. I went with the New York Jets. That defense, Sauce Gardner. Garrett Wilson was the 8th best receiver in football last year in terms of fantasy, with Mike White and Joe Flacco. When you take out the Zach Wilson starts, you have to imagine he's going to be that with Aaron Rodgers. So they also added a lot of talent around Rodgers. So hard not to buy in a little bit on what the Jets are. But I'd be lying if I said there isn't part of my brain that's like expecting this to somehow go down in catastrophic flames, where every week Aaron Rodgers is getting pestered by the New York media and they go 7-10 and they're disappointing, and maybe Sauce has a sophomore slump and isn't quite as dominant. Like, it could happen. I'm aware of the possibility, but I'm still picking the Jets.
Mm-hmm. I have a similar feeling about the Jets, but there's just too much talent to overlook. My top wild card spot I'm giving to Cincinnati. I do have the Ravens winning that division. Cincinnati's too good to not be in the mix at the minimum. I think they steal that top wild card spot. I'll put the Jets number 2 at this. And then in third, I'm going to be leaving off the Jacksonville Jaguars. I have the Jags taking a step back, not making the cut, and instead the Denver Broncos taking that last wild card slot.
I like the Broncos. They're probably my toughest omission. Is the Broncos. Before the Jalen Ramsey injury, I think Miami was my toughest omission.
Yeah.
What happened was I actually had the Jets at 9-8, tied with the Broncos, Chargers, and Dolphins. I had all 4 when I initially did my projections, finishing 9-8. When the Ramsey news came out, I decided let's bump one down on Miami and bump one up on the Jets, so that pushed the Jets to 10 wins. But the Denver and the Chargers, I think, are going to be right there. Who are your 3 wild cards?
I have Baltimore as being the first wild card spot. Second, I have the Jets, very high on the Jets as well. Third, we all have a different one here. I'm going to go with the Chargers to be the one to come out on top there. I think it's all very close. I think we've talked about that a couple times already, but I think it's all very close to, with those last 4 teams. And I think the Chargers are going to be the one to take it over. Herbert maybe actually get it done. We'll see. Sean Bernard's over there shaking his head. No, I can see on the corner of my eye.
Yeah, he has not got it done so far.
Not
23 and 22 in his career. Never won a playoff game, but a top 5 quarterback by a lot of people's standards somehow.
And a $265 million quarterback. Now, nobody has ever been paid more and given more credit for accomplishing less in the history of anything.
He did have the best coach in Brandon Staley over there.
He still has him. I will say that's the negative for me. If they would have fired the head coach and brought in a real head coach, the Chargers would be my 7 seed over the Jets pretty easily. Yeah. I will say, if they fired Brandon Staley and hired Kellen Moore as their head coach, I'd probably be saying that was a good thing. And Kellen Moore is there as their play caller and their offensive coordinator,
which will make a difference.
I think he's really smart. I think the defense is going to be even worse than it's been the last couple of years. They added nothing.
Yeah.
The Chargers really did nothing to this roster besides Quentin Johnston, who I didn't even really think made sense as like the receiver to add to a Keenan Allen and a Mike Williams. Like, they needed speed. Like, go get Zay Flowers, go get, Jalen Hyatt, like go get a guy who could really stretch the defense, and then you can use Allen and Williams the way you want to. But whatever.
And by the way, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are very good. That's
very good.
Very good.
Mike Williams is one of the more underrated players in football.
100%. And health is always the biggest downside for both of them, that they're not always there for sure. But those are 2 very solid receivers to have as your core, adding Quentin Johnston to the mix too. So,
not to mention having the most historic pass catcher in the history of the running back position in Austin Eckler. And McCaffrey's probably in the conversation too, but it's those 2 guys. So the AFC Championship, I'll go first. And the team that I have losing the AFC Championship is a team that Sean left out of the playoffs. I have Kansas City over Jacksonville in the AFC Championship. I'm so tempted. I am so tempted to pick Jacksonville and have this be a Doug Peterson versus the Eagles Super Bowl. But in my opinion, it's the most likely rematch Super Bowl that I can ever remember. So I have Chiefs Eagles again, which is boring. But what do you have?
I have Bills over Chiefs.
All right.
I think it's going to be. We're seeing a lot of familiar faces this year when we talk about legitimate contenders. There's not that team that I think is itching to get in the mix. I think it's a lot of the Burrows, the Mahomes, the Allen. It's going to be the same guys that we know. I do think this is the year that Josh Allen finally gets past that hurdle that he's tripped up on of not beating Patrick Mahomes or not getting deep in the playoffs. And I think he does make a Super Bowl run. So I think it's going to be an Eagles-Bills Super Bowl, which would just be awesome.
I'm also going to be with Mark over here again, and I'm going to do KC and the Jags. Jansen's loving this talk right now. If he's listening, he's loving it being Johnny Jags. But
we have the same Final Four.
I at least when I heard you say it, I was like, oh my gosh, we got the same thing going on here. But that is just how that's how I see it going down. The other team, obviously the Bills, but that's another team that it's hard for them to get their job done in the playoffs. So we'll see. But for now, I'm going to go with KC over the Jags. And just like you said, that Super Bowl rematch is just bound to happen.
Yeah.
I think it is. It's very.
Eagles get the best this time?
I'm hoping. Man.
I think so.
I think they do. I think it's
I
Eagles
think
over
they
KC.
can.
You got Eagles over Bills?
I do. I
We all got the Eagles.
Yeah.
Super Bowl or bust.
Yep.
There we
It
go.
is. It's the situation.
It is the situation. All right. We're going to take a hard shift. On the other side, we're going to talk some MLB picks. So keep it locked to the Tough Cover Radio Show right here on The Gambler.
Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler. Now, total traffic for Philadelphia.
Look out for plenty of volume, first of all, in both directions on the Blue Route between 95 and the Media Swarthmore area. On the Vine Street
130 is fine for me. And then the game that I have is actually on the Angels, who I was high on earlier on this season. And the Blue Jays are a better team than the Angels, no doubt. I don't think there is really an argument there. But the pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays, do we know who that is? Mark Henry Jr.
It's Fat Man Manoah.
The guy that I have a Cy Young bet in for.
On Manoah?
I had a bet in to start the season.
That's not going well.
No, it's not. And I'm now betting against him for that simple fact that he has been a horrible pitcher. And the Angels can actually hit. They've won 8 of their last 10 games. And I'm hoping that it continues again tonight. They lost to the Blue Jays last night. Hopefully they get back on track. And who better to do it against than Alek Manoah? So Angels money line, I got it plus 105, and I got Aaron Nola over 6.5 strikeouts at minus 130.
Yeah, I'm sharing that Angels pick with you. I'm kind of starting to buy in on the Angels. And as you mentioned, Alex Manoah just has not been good this year. 6.05 ERA, 2-8 on the year. The Angels, on the other hand, are buying. They turned into buyers at the deadline. They're no longer chalking it up, trading Ohtani. It feels like they're going for it. And I do kind of respect it on their end that they kind of have to. They've been playing some better ball. Yeah, they're 8-2 in their last 10. I think that continues today. I think Alek Manoah, great name, not a great pitcher. I think it's a good time for them to continue teeing off. My second bet, I'm taking the Nationals at plus 145 over the Mets today. Patrick Corbin on the mound against Carlos Correa. The Mets just feels like they're falling apart, and it feels like it is not getting any better. I have faith in the Nationals to keep that going. Patrick Corbin got hit around a little bit on his last outing. I think he's going to rebound, and I think they get the win today.
So it's funny. So I'll start it off. Oh, by the way, let's get ready to gamble. I didn't put my full heart into that. I was a little late on it. But 307, my best bet of the day is the Los Angeles Angels plus 115 on the money line. So
all on the same page.
That's an official Tough Cover Show pick right there. The Angels, all 3 of us, all over it. It's my best bet of the day.
Love it.
4 units on that one. It's also my only bet of the afternoon slate. So that game coming up at 307, they gave you the reasons why to like it. Reed Detmers has just been far, far, far better than Alek Manoah. Everyone talked about how good Shohei was during that doubleheader. Obviously had the shutout, or complete game shutout, and also they hit 2 homers in the previous game. Hunter Renfroe also went 6 for 9 that day across those 2 games. Hunter Renfroe, kind of like we talked about with some of the Phillies players earlier, very streaky hitter. I think Renfroe's in the middle of a streak, so I think he keeps it going. I think Shohei keeps it going. I think Detmers keeps kind of his positive streak going in terms of on the mound. Love the Angels at 307. At 705, I've got the Phils minus 1.5 at the Pirates. Preister with a 9.28 ERA against the Phils, and Aaron Nola has had tremendous success against Pittsburgh and in PNC Park. So I expect Nola to continue his winning ways in Pittsburgh. And I expect Pittsburgh to continue their losing ways in general as an organization. That is a joke. At 710, I'm also picking in that Nats-Mets game, but I'm going with the over. So give me over 9.5 there. Corbin and Carrasco, 5.01 ERA for Corbin, 5.82 ERA for Carrasco. Washington Nationals rosters had a lot of success against Carrasco. If you look at the BVP, Mets have, along with every other team in baseball, have had success against Corbin. And if you look at the BVP, and then also another factor here is the Nats, a lot of these hitters probably auditioning for other teams right now. So some of these hitters, they might want to get out of Washington if I'm not mistaken. So I think there's a chance they're playing their hearts out there. At 715, this was a bet I really liked when it was at over 9. It went to 9.5, and it's now at 10. I have it at 9.5. I would still take it at 10. But it might have been my best bet if it was at 9. I like over 9.5, over 10, whatever you get it at, in Cubs Cardinals. You have Jameson Taillon's been one of my favorite pitchers to fade on the mound. I saw him in person at Citizens Bank Park earlier this year. Dude was throwing meatballs with sauce on him. Like I've never seen a pitcher lobbing him up the way he was. So he's been a little bit better since then. Still got a 5.75 ERA. Then you got Adam Wainwright, good old Uncle Charlie, 7.31 ERA. He's been one of the worst pitchers in baseball over the course of the season. I know he's a Hall of Famer. I think Jeremy, is he a Hall of Famer? Adam Wainwright?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Adam Wainwright is 100% a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. So he's a Hall of Famer, but he's been really terrible this year. Both pitchers been really, really terrible. So give me the over there. This is a bet that I don't love. 720. I took Braves minus 1.5. Little revenge game for the Braves against Julio Teheran. How do you feel about that revenge game? Haven't been able to bring it up.
Wow, I forgot about Julio Teheran. He's
been
in
pretty good in
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee. Yeah, he's been pretty good.
Yeah, he's been better. He came out of nowhere. I love that as a revenge game. He was actually really good in Atlanta for a couple years.
Or is the revenge Tehran against the Braves? Who knows?
No, yeah, it is.
But I'm going with the Braves -1.5 here because they got Bryce Elder on the mound. They have such an advantage in the lineup and on the mound, I think, even with Tehran being better. So I'm going with the Braves -1.5. And then my last play is at 9-10. I've got the over at 10.5 in Reds Dodgers. And that is because Luke Weaver, I saw Jansen was tweeting. Let's find Jansen's tweet. He had a very funny tweet that,
he did.
That gives you exactly why that I'd be interested in the over here. Luke Weaver has an ERA over 7 this season, has an ERA over 9 the last 2 months. He's given up 41 runs in 42 innings, and somehow the Reds have won 9 of those last 10 starts, which shows how good the Reds offense has been. And seems like they give run support to this Luke Weaver character. So I think that continues. I think that runs continue there. And Emmett Sheehan has been brutal. I bet the over in a game he was pitching in last week and cashed in the second inning. So give me the over there, 10 or over 10.5 in Reds Dodgers. That wraps up my baseball picks for the day. So we got a little time here. So I'm going to pitch it to you guys before I get to my thing. Get some donkey brains ready.
Okay.
Get some donkey brains ready. Fire up Charlie Kelly on the machine over there on the doohickey. See if we have that going. But before we get there, we're getting close to college football season. I said we're close to NFL season. College football starts 2 weeks before the NFL does because you have week 0 and then you have week 1. So I felt there's no better time, especially since my focus this week research-wise has been on college football. I've been really, really diving in, trying to figure out and iron out my projections in college football. So let's give you my top 10 going in, or my projections for what the final year top 10 will be. At number 10, I have a tie. So a little bit of a cop-out. I couldn't figure out which Pac-12 team to include. I have Oregon finishing 10-2. I also have Utah finishing 10-2. Couldn't figure out which team to go with. If I gun to my head, I'd probably pick Oregon. Bo Nix, one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Dan Lanning, coming into his second year there in Oregon. Defense wasn't that good last year, but he's a defensive-minded guy. You have to imagine they keep making incremental growth there. A lot of returning production for Oregon. Utah, not as much returning production, but you do have Cam Rising, and you do have Kyle Whittingham, who is just so consistent. Number 9. We're back. The Texas Longhorns. I can't believe I'm falling for it again, but I'm falling for it again. They're so good on paper. Xavier Worthy, Quinn Ewers. They have guys replacing Bijan already. But they went 7-5 last year. And Steve Sarkisian has not proven to be the type of guy who they need him to be yet. If he had, I might be talking about them making a playoff run, but I'm not quite there. I still have them at 9, though. I have them winning 10 games, and it would be better if they didn't have to play a non-conference game against my number 8 team, the Alabama Crimson Tide. And people are going to hear that, and they're going to go, number 8 for Alabama? That's pretty low. Well, their quarterback is a 3-headed monster of Ty Simpson, Jalen Milroe, who looked awful when he came in last year, and Tyler Buckner, the quarterback at Notre Dame, who was absolutely terrible before getting hurt. So I just don't know. I don't know why I'm supposed to think this team's supposed to compete for a playoff. They have a pretty easy schedule for Alabama purposes. So I have them going 10-2 almost by default, or actually 11-1 and losing to Georgia in the conference championship. So 11-2, but I just don't believe in the quarterback situation here. Number 7, I have a team that is being slept on, I think, like crazy coming out of the Big 12, the team that won the Big 12 last year. Their over-under is only 8.5. The Kansas State Wildcats. I don't understand why I'm supposed to be so negative on them. They went 9-3 last year and then won their conference championship, lost in their bowl game to Alabama. Chris Kleiman, one of the most underrated coaches in the country. Will Howard, one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country. Kansas State, one of the most underrated programs in the country. I expect Kansas State to continue getting better under Chris Kleiman, and this seems like it's Will Howard's year to kind of compete for maybe a Big 12 All-American spot there at the quarterback position. And then at number 5 and number 6, these guys go kind of hand in hand here. But Penn State, I have at 11-1, coming in at number 5, and coming in at number 6, I've got Michigan at 10-2. Wow. A lot of people are going to have Michigan in the playoffs. I think Michigan's the third best team in the Big Ten. I think Penn State's better. I'm a believer in Drew Aller. People are going to say, oh, Sean Clifford's gone. Like Penn State's going to take a step back. They don't have this experienced quarterback. Drew Aller is the best prospect Penn State's had at quarterback in a very long time. And I take the prospect of him being very good over what Sean Clifford was guaranteed to be last year, which was average, maybe above average. I've never been a Sean Clifford guy. They have a lot of first-round NFL draft talent, like Olu Fashanu, a couple players on defense as well. I think this Penn State team is as legitimate a contender as they've had up in Happy Valley in a very long time. And then it comes down to who is in my playoff. My number one, Georgia.
Of course.
Not a lot of explanation.
So the Philadelphia Eagles minor league team, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah. Exactly. And Brock Bowers, he's going to look great in midnight green. But I have them going 13-0. I have them walking through the SEC. They have a really easy schedule for the SEC. You wouldn't think it. But number 2, I have Ohio State. I have them going undefeated. Marvin Harrison Jr., Enigma Ibuka. They just have such a Trevion Henderson, a running back. They have such a loaded offense. I know that they have Kyle McCord, a first-time quarterback, stepping in. Pretty amazing situation to step into. It's almost like the San Francisco 49ers for Brock Purdy. Like, I don't think it matters who's stepping in. Like, you have 2 of the 5 best receivers in the country, probably the best offensive, or maybe the top 3 offensive coach in the country in Ryan Day. Ohio State's going to cruise through the Big Ten, and I think they're going to lay a beat down on Michigan in the Big House. Number 3, my surprise team to make the playoff. And I didn't know it was that as big of a surprise because I think they're a trendy team. The way Sean Brace reacted yesterday, maybe I'm going out on more of a limb than I thought. The Florida State Seminoles. I have them winning the ACC. I have them beating LSU in week 1, and I have them beating Clemson later on in the season. So Florida State, I have them going 13-0 and cruising through the ACC. And at number 4, my final playoff spot, and it was close. I almost put Penn State there, but I'm going with USC. I'm going with Caleb Williams. I'm going with Lincoln Riley. I think they lose one game, but I think they win the conference, and I think that gets them into the playoff. But it'll be interesting. So I have a one-loss conference champion, USC, with maybe not any big wins, but maybe a bunch of good wins. And I have them making it over a one-loss non-conference champion, Penn State, but Penn State will have a Michigan win. So that's where I don't know what the committee would do there. There's a chance they would put Penn State in above USC, but I'm going with USC. A lot of people skeptical about USC's defense. Last year was Lincoln Riley's first year there, and the defense was almost good enough to get them there. They went 11-3, and if they didn't strip up at the end of the year, Caleb Williams got hurt at the end of the year, they could have very well been in the playoffs. So I expect them to rectify that, and I expect Lincoln Riley to get right back there. Any thoughts on any of those, Sean?
I want to ask how good you think Caleb Williams is, because I'm seeing the hype about this guy as pretty much a surefire number 1 overall pick, a guy that's being compared to some crazy talents when it comes to quarterback. Is he the truth? And like, where do you think he ranks among prospects over recent?
He's the closest thing I've seen to Mahomes.
Wow.
I mean, the things he can do in the pocket and his instincts are just so outrageous. And he's a good runner, but I think in the NFL, it'll be like Mahomes. Like, he'll mainly use that to get separation and get some space to make something happen down the field. And I think he does such a good job at that already. He's on the Trevor Lawrence track, whereas I said Trevor Lawrence was the greatest college quarterback that I ever scouted. I don't think he's quite as polished as Trevor was and quite as just rock solid as a prospect as Trevor was, but he's probably going to be the second best quarterback prospect that I've ever evaluated. That's how high I am on Caleb. He should be the runaway number 1 pick. And if Arizona, who I think will be the worst team in the NFL, if they get there, I'm pretty high on Kyler Murray. You have to trade Kyler Murray.
Wow.
If you get the first pick, you have to trade Kyler, get value for him, and draft Caleb Williams.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm excited. That's one of the things I'm excited to watch going into this college football season, because this is a guy who I'm seeing the buzz about quite a bit, that I see plenty of buy-in. I know he's already produced a decent bit, and Heisman winner, if I'm not right. So reigning Heisman winner, guy who's got it done already.
Trying to be the second Heisman ever to repeat.
Yeah, to live up to those expectations a lot. So I'm very excited to see what we got in Caleb Williams this year, but interesting to see your praise there.
Yeah, I mean, there's another guy too from North Carolina who Drake May, who's Luke May's little brother.
Really?
Fun fact.
Okay.
Yeah. But Drake May, North Carolina's got a terrible defense, and they lost a lot of their skill position talent this year. So it'll be like Josh Downs, but it'll be interesting to see if he's just so good that it doesn't matter. he's going to be a top 10 pick, probably top 5 pick, Drake May, if probably this number 2 pick, honestly, after Caleb Williams. So it'll be interesting to see. He's another guy to watch. There's other names like Michael Penix in Washington. He's been a name that I've heard a lot about. Riley Leonard, an under the radar name in Duke. There's so many quarterback names this year that could be extremely, extremely interesting. So that's going to wrap it up for the college football segment here. I could have went deeper into the top 25. Maybe we'll do that at another date, but let's do the Donkey Brains of the Week.
How do we know you're not a donkey brain man?
Did you guys come up with any good candidates here for the Donkey Brains of the Week?
I did. My Donkey Brains of the Week, I'm giving to Dame Lillard. I feel like we've talked about this quite a bit, but yeah, I am over the Dame Lillard thing. We now have Adam Silver releasing a statement to all 30 teams talking about the malpractice that is occurring by Dame Lillard and his agent, that he is forcing his way to Miami. I get this is a complicated issue. The lines have been blurred on what the procedures and standards are for a lot of these superstars, and there is an aspect that it makes sense for the team, in addition to the star, to trade him rather than let him leave in free agency. I would have much less sympathy if Dame Lillard did not sign an extension last offseason to put him on the books for this insane amount of money. I don't like the getting your cake and eating it too by signing these contracts and then forcing your way, which has become the norm. And Dame Lillard, of all people, has become the most egregious in it by the way that he has just circled this team. He's just circled Miami. They don't really have the assets to make a fair trade, and that looks like it's somehow going to happen. So I am curious how it's going to play out. But to me, it's Dame Lillard is the Donkey Brains of the Week for just continuing to think the world revolves around him.
How do we know you're not a donkey brain man?
No? Okay. I'm just going to give it to Phillies fans. The Negadelphians.
Mm-hmm.
The Chicken Littles.
Nick
Picone, Donkey. Oh, that'd be interesting. Should we give Nick Picone Donkey Brains of the Week? Nah, I feel bad. He's going through some hurt. He's a questionable. He's a game time decision for SummerSlam next week. Nick Picone.
Oh, is that right?
Game time decision. He's having some issues, so I don't want to give him Donkey Brains. I don't want to add anything onto his plate.
I don't know how I deal with. I mean, I'm like a 2 or 3 time recipient of Donkey Brains.
I've won it 3 or 4 times myself. I've given myself 3 or 4 Donkey Brains.
I actually won it almost a year ago for SummerSlam.
You did.
No,
I think you did win it.
I know I did. Do you remember what happened?
You couldn't. You went to watch Andrew Painter.
I watched Andrew Painter pitch a minor league game instead of watching.
Won't get to do that for 2 years.
Yeah.
Good job, Phillies.
Oh, good thing I went to go see it then.
Honestly, Donkey Brains of the Week maybe should go to the Phillies training staff and whoever didn't get Andrew Painter to get Tommy John surgery 6 months ago. But the thing I'll say about that is, and Jack Fritz says it well, you can't force a guy to get surgery. And apparently that's what happened there. Painter wanted to give it a go. Whatever.
And the best case scenario would have been him not needing the surgery, and they found a way for him not to get Tommy John. That didn't happen. So I guess that was their optimistic outlook of, I don't know, maybe this figures itself out or however their medical outlook was. But I do get like the best case scenario would have been avoiding it, so doing their best not to. But yeah, in retrospect, it definitely would have helped if he had got this done a couple months ago.
Yeah, it just sucks. It sucks to put 6 more months past what was possible on his return date. But my Donkey Brains of the Week are still going to go to just the people being negative and the people tweeting after a 4-game losing streak like the season was over, and the people who complain after wins. Like, we're winning games. Like, that's the whole point. No one's going to care about the style points of a July win in October. They're just going to care that we had 88 of them and that was enough to get in, or whatever the number is. And like I said earlier, you cannot treat baseball like football. You cannot treat a 162-game season like a 17-game season. It's just not fair to how the sport is played, and you're gonna be reacting both ways 86 times over the season. Like, that's just how it goes. Like, it's a back and forth sport. They're a 94. They start. If you're gonna say anything about the Phillies and you're gonna complain about the Phillies, you should say, I hate this team for starting 4-9. Because that's what it is. Like, that's really what it is. Since then, they're 14 games over 500. They're on a 94 win pace since then. They've had the normal ups and downs of a 94 win elite top 7 team in the MLB. The normal ups and downs that you go through in a 162 game season. But they started 4-9.
Mm-hmm.
That was a terrible start. And I was saying at the time, like, I couldn't believe how bad the start was. And none of my wildest imaginations were they going to start that poorly. But if you're complaining about the Phillies, you should just be like, they really screwed themselves in the first 2 weeks of the season, the first 2.5 weeks of the season. Because since then, you've been making up things to complain about. Jeremy, do the Donkey Brains of the week go to Dame Lillard or the Negadelphians?
I'm going to go with the Negadelphians.
All
In
right.
my mind, that's what I believe.
All right, but I'm glad we talked about Lillard. We'll talk. We'll have more Sixers stuff, and I can't wait until like September when we have to jam in our East and West predictions and our win totals in the middle of football season. But I get meticulous with the win totals when it comes to predicting for the NBA. So we'll definitely be doing that in the future. There'll be more basketball to come. But I'm happy we were able to kick off the football preview month here on the Gambler on Tough Cover Radio Show, and we're going to continue to do it next week. So Jeremy, thanks for pushing the buttons over there.
Yep.
Sean, great stuff on the football.
Absolutely.
Sean Bernard, football guy.
Absolutely.
I didn't
know.
know
Everything. Everything.
You didn't know. You consider you such a hoop head.
True.
But I forget you're such a football
Hooper,
guy.
Football,
Wait.
soccer player.
Wait,
Yeah.
UFC picks.
UFC picks. Oh, real quick. I do have 3 picks. Amazing card tonight. But 3 picks I'm going to go with real quick. Kevin Holland, one of my favorite fighters in the entire UFC. He's absolutely fantastic going up against Michael Chiesa.
I know that. I know that name.
Cannot get his last name right. And then I'm also going to go with Alex Pereira.
I know that name.
Learn that this is his first time fighting in 205. He's usually been in 185.
Wow, that's a big jump.
He's still a big dude. So I'm going to go with Alex Pereira there. And then the main event, Dustin Poirier going up against Justin Gaethje 2. I'm going to go with Justin Gaethje at plus 130. He's so good. He's had, I think I saw he has 9, like he knocks people out all the time. He doesn't like to go to a decision. He likes knocking people out, and he does it at a really amazing pace. So I'm pulling for Justin Gaethje tonight.
Yeah, and to throw mine, I totally agree on the Kevin Holland pick, minus 145. I think that's a great bet there.
Love it.
I will take the over 1.5 rounds in the Jan Blankovic versus Alex Pereira fight. Like you said, Pereira hopping up a weight class. I think some of his knockout power comes away with that. Jan can eat a couple punches, and he's a guy who's got a good ground game. I think
he's like a wrestler, right, Jan? Yeah.
I think this is a fight that goes probably the distance, if not at least 2 rounds. So I like the over in that. And I also think my guy, Derek Lewis here.
Derek Lewis.
My guy is worth a sprinkle here. Plus 175.
What's his name? He's got a nickname.
Oh, I'm not even fully sure.
Isn't it like Big Balls or something?
Yeah.
Isn't it like Derek Big Balls Lewis or something?
Yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy. So he's kind of on the way out of his career, but he will have at least 2 just let the fist fly moments where he just gets swinging. I think that's enough to cause a knockout, and for me, that's enough to put. I think that's a good bet there.
And there's a big boxing fight. Any thoughts?
There is,
thoughts on the way out?
I like Crawford in it. I think Spence versus Crawford is the big main event. These are 2 of the top 10 pound for pound fighters in the country, have been for several years. There's been some promotional stuff that has held back this fight from happening. So it's kind of a Pacquiao Mayweather situation where it's several years since it probably actually should have, but it's still going to be a very nice fight. I lean Crawford. I think it's going to be one that goes pretty deep and a very good fight, but one worth tuning into, no doubt.
Bigger and better fight than Davis Garcia, you said.
I do. I believe that. Definitely a higher quality fight. And 2 just better fighters in general. I mean, Tank's awesome, but I don't think Garcia is more known for all the other stuff, not just as a boxer. These 2 are real deal boxers.
So great stuff there on the end. A little combat sports corner at the end. And next week, we'll be talking
wrestling.
We'll be talking fake sports.
Yeah.
We'll be talking SummerSlam. Yeah. Let me talk to you. Next week. So keep it locked to the Gambler. Green Legion Radio coming up next at 1:00. Thanks for listening.
In this week's Marketers Report, Raja Manar, Chief Marketer